I began the meeting by making this statement, which I think needs to be made to the nation. America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
In the late 1900s, President Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs in order to eradicate illicit drug use in the U.S. The specific aim was to destroy and inhibit the international drug trade, making drugs scarcer and costlier, and therefore making drug habits in the U.S. unaffordable. But back then, the drug war was not as prominent of an issue as it is today. But as drugs continued to be smuggled into the U.S., more drug reforms were made, causing the government to funnel more and more money into the war. With drugs coming in from several countries like Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and even Europe, the government couldn't pinpoint a location to focus on cutting the source of drugs. But if the U.S. government thought that was the worst of it, wait until they were introduced to a new player in the war on drugs. This man will be responsible for billions of cocaine imported to the U.S. every day during his reign of terror. He would propel the drug war into more national spotlight than Nixon could ever dream of. This man was the infamous Pablo Escobar. With an estimated worth of $30 billion, Escobar was named one of the top 10 richest men on the earth by Forbes. In his prime, Pablo was pulling in about $60 million a day. The billions of dollars pulled in every day by Escobar was coming straight from America's pocket. Pablo also propelled the cocaine industry into heights unknown. He was controlling around 80% of the cocaine being imported into the U.S., and with tons of cocaine being imported every day, Americans became more and more addicted. According to the Market Mogul, more than 15 tons of cocaine were reportedly smuggled each day, netting Pablo's cartel around $420 million a week. And after many near misses, the government finally caught up to Pablo. Escobar met his end on a rooftop in his hometown, Medellin, Colombia. Over the next couple decades, particularly under the Reagan administration, Americans saw the escalation of the international military and police efforts against drugs. Experts have suggested that the drug wars led to unintended consequences that have proliferated violence around the world and to mass incarcerations in the U.S. According to Fox News, America has spent around $1 trillion on the drug war, yet drug use is still rampant. Records indicate that marijuana and prescription drug abuse are climbing while cocaine use is way down. Nixon's first drug budget was at around $100 million. Now it's up to $15.1 billion, 13 times Nixon's amount according to the Associated Press. At the same time, drug abuse is costing the nation in other ways. The Justice Department estimates the consequences of drug abuse: an overburdened justice system, a strained healthcare system, lost productivity, and environmental destruction, all of which cost the United States around $215 billion a year. The spending estimates don't account for the loss of potential taxes on currently illegal substances. According to a 2010 paper from the Libertarian Cato Institute, taxing and regulating illicit drugs similar to tobacco and alcohol could raise $46.7 billion in tax revenue each year. In Colombia alone, where Pablo Escobar resided, the U.S. spent more than $6 billion combating cocaine importation and Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. In response to the failures and unintended consequences, many drug policy experts and historians have called for reforms. A larger focus on rehabilitation, decriminalization of current illicit substances, and even legalization of all drugs. With the push for legalization of marijuana, experts have suggested that it could lead to negative results in the U.S.
Generally, the more marijuana is available, it would tend to increase a drug culture where other drugs might be experimented with and would be a sort of a gateway to potentially increasing use of illegal drugs.
Another major focus in the drug war was the effects it had on the population in prisons. After the U.S. stepped up the drug war throughout the 1970s and 80s, harsher sentences for drug offenders played an important role in turning the country into the world's leader in incarcerations. Many experts have pointed to the government loosening their policy on drug offenders, leading to more offenders flowing in and out of the prisons faster. The rapid flow of offenders could have led to the spike in population many critics are alluding to.
But without a doubt, there's a high population. I think going back to like the 80s and the 90s, there were real strict federal laws that were passed mandating strong sentences for drugs. In the last presidential administration, those were loosened quite a bit so that drug offenders do not get as high of a sentence as they used to. So I guess it has changed in the sense people aren't in jail as long now as they used to be for drugs federally. But yeah, it definitely is a big percentage of prisons, and that really hasn't changed. That's been a constant for the last several years.
The consensus vote seems to favor ending the drug war because of the negative impacts that it has had on the U.S.
So, this is what I've dedicated my life to building an organization and a movement of people who believe we need to turn our backs on the failed prohibitions of the past and embrace new drug policies grounded in science, compassion, health, and human rights. We're people who come from across the political spectrum and every other spectrum as well. We're people who love our drugs, people who hate drugs, and people who don't give a damn about drugs. But every one of us believe that this war on drugs, this backward, heartless, disastrous war on drugs has got to end.